Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my weekly Node-RED development live stream. Hope you are all well. Hope you are keeping, hope you're keeping well in these interesting times. So this is my weekly delve, spending about an hour or so into doing some Node-RED development work. If you're new to the channel, I'm Nick O'Leary, co-creator of Node-RED, project lead for Node-RED. I'm going to spend the next hour or so just doing some development work on Node-RED, hopefully interesting stuff. So this is developing the core, actually working on the code of Node-RED rather than using Node-RED. If it's your first time, do say hi in the chat. If you're watching live on Twitch, please do say hi. I just had to glance over to make sure I'd actually clicked the start streaming button. Looks like I have. I'm sure one week I'm going to forget to click that button and I'm going to be talking to a whole load of no one. So, yeah. Welcome. Thanks, Christian. Good to know it's working, and thanks for the feedback. If you're watching the YouTube catch-up, then, do drop in a comment. Let me know you're there. So what are we going to be doing tonight? Well, I wanted to do a quick recap on... Well, not recap, just round out where I got to last week with some of the Subflow module stuff, and just sort of give a real brief update as to where I actually got to on that. The other thing I want to do is then just talk a bit about some, what I'm going to spend some more time tonight is continuing some work I've been doing today, which is just tidying up some APIs and doing some internal refactoring. So it's not some big fancy new code development. It's about just tidying up some code or some APIs, trying to move some stuff around without breaking things, because of some other work, which I'll talk about briefly, I've been doing with Node-RED. Just sort of found some rough edges of some of our internal APIs that just made it not as pleasant to use as it could be. Now, I am talking to you whilst I try just to fix my computer. Well, fix my Node-RED install, because it's in a bit of a broken state at the moment for a variety of reasons. So let's recap. What were we doing last week? So last week we were doing subflow modules. This is how a subflow can be exported from the editor, published to npm as an npm module, and then installed by another user as if it was any other node in the catalog. And the particular bit I spent last week basically trying to work out the right approaches for was how can we I am talking whilst trying to run npm install commands and running them in the wrong directory. Here we go. So how can a subflow module have dependencies that are other node modules, and how could we resolve loading them? And I spent most of the time talking through the problem without really getting into the depths of the code, but it was a really useful session of just talking through the problem, because where I soon ended up was that actually, and it's funny because quite a few people commented on YouTube in the days after around so the approach we were trying to take before was how to deal with these extra modules get installed when you install a subflow module. They suddenly appear in the palette, and that can get confusing for the user. And actually the consensus, which was the same conclusion I came to on the day after I streamed and got it working pretty quickly, is we just we load these extra nodes that get pulled in by the subflow, but we don't add them to the editor. So the user never sees them, so there's no risk of the user ever starting to use them without them being proper dependencies in their own package file. and then solve the problem of what happens if the user then chooses to install one of those nodes, as they're perfectly entitled to do, dealing with the fact we've already got it loaded, we just have to unmask it, and then the reverse, when they want to remove it, well, we can't unload it, but we can at least hide it from the editor. I got all that working, and there are pull requests on GitHub, where if you're at all interested, you can go look at the depths of that code. So thanks to those of you, I think I replied to most of you on YouTube, who sort of suggested, what about that approach? And you're quite right. In that's exactly the approach I ended up with. So that's good. So I've almost fixed my Node-RED install, because I'm not going to get very far if this persists in being as broken as it is right now. So what are we doing tonight? Hold on. Give me 30 seconds. I'm failing to talk coherently whilst talking to you guys. And I now see why. What's going on? Right. Right, what's going on? My Node-RED install is... So the problem is, for a variety of reasons, I've switched out of the subflow module branch, but I have subflow modules installed, and it's really confusing my Node-RED install, this vanilla version of Node-RED trying to install subflow modules. And for the life of me, I can't work out what's actually broken it. Why is loading... you know what? This isn't... Is this something else? Is this stuff I've broken myself today? Oh, man. Why isn't safe mode working? Right. Sorry about this, guys. We will get going properly in a sec. So today I've been doing a bunch of refactoring of some of the internals. So one of the things I've been doing is removing... When we started Node-RED, there's this idea of a promise in JavaScript. And they weren't very... Well, there was a standard for them, but they weren't widely implemented. But there were libraries that implemented them. So we... why isn't -- safe putting me in safe mode? Does anyone want to hazard a guess? Sorry, I'm getting a bit of a false start here. Why isn't safe mode enabling? What is going on? Right, okay, I see what's going on. I have broken my Node-RED install, not beyond repair, but certainly not helping myself right now. Hit deploy, that's now running, almost working. Git checkout API tidy. Right, here we go. I'm with you now. I have definitely broken something in this branch, which is what I didn't think I'd broken, but promises, JavaScript. In the early days of Node-RED, we imported a library called when.js. When.js is a module that provides an implementation of the promise spec. And it was pretty widely used in the early days of promises before they became a standard part of JavaScript and just built into Node. So we had a lot of code in the core of Node-RED that still used when.js, and I've slowly been removing them as we go. And basically today I've spent a bunch of time removing all remaining traces of when.js, and I thought I'd done it, but right now, when I load my workspace, it's hanging on loading catalog nodes. Loading node catalogs. So something's wrong, something's broken. This wasn't what I was planning on doing, but it's as good as anywhere, just to delve in to see what have I broken. So at the point we're doing load node catalogs, what are we actually doing? Is it, because there are no errors in the log. Okay, so let's go, so we're loading up the message catalogs. That's what we're doing. And loading up the message catalogs, so we go into the editor API module, lib. So this contains all the HTTP endpoints used by the editor. Locales. So we come in here and it must be doing a get, and it's asking us to load a resource, for which we go off to the i18n module. Is this right? Am I looking in the right place? I think this, because this is code I've modified today. So let's get catalog for the namespace and the language. Let's see. So, okay, Node-RED's restarted. Do a quick refresh. So you can see it's loaded a bunch of catalogs. And it has load, yeah. Okay, so now it's but it's maybe load node catalogs is something different. Sorry, this is not the sort of debugging I was hoping to talk to you. I actually I've got something quite cool planned, but I kind of need to get this working. I thought this was working. So I'm just doing a quick bit of delve. So I've gone into the message catalog, event.load node catalogs. I just want to pinpoint exactly what's the editor doing that's hanging. So we're going to search for event.load node catalogs. Oops. And we're doing it at this point where we do the load of the node. We're loading the node list. No, not. We've done the load of the node list. And now we're doing the load node catalogs. Let's just stick a done in there so we know if that's actually completed or not. Load node catalog. Yes, that's never completing. Okay, so why is i18n load node catalogs never completing? So we're in here. We are going to be sending a request for whatever this is. Done. And to load tells us how many more there are to do. Right. So you can see in the log, yeah, we're sending them, but we never get a response back. Okay, but the endpoint is node/messages, which is a different endpoint to the one I was just looking at. So if we go into edit API lib, it's not locales. It's the part of the admin API for nodes. Just find it in here. Nodes locales. No. Nodes messages, wasn't it? No? Yeah, nodes messages goes to nodes.get module catalogs. Nodes get, like I say, this isn't what I wanted to be doing. This is me now just flailing around. Get module catalogs. So we're calling Runtime API nodes get module catalogs. We're narrowing down because this is code I've mucked around with earlier today. So let's get module. No, it doesn't claim to have a get module catalogs. Must do. Yeah, it does. get module catalogs. So I've broken this code somewhere. What have I done? It's oh, he says, right. So okay, I see exactly what I've done, and interesting that the unit test didn't catch this. I guess this is something we don't unit test, which is unfortunate. What I've done today is, okay, I'm salvaging this. Let's switch to the whiteboard. I'm going to draw some pictures. Let's make sure it's a colour you guys can see. Right, hopefully this is going to work. So what we got is, you've got the editor. Is that coming through? Yeah. Right, tell me if this is working from, hopefully you guys can see the pictures as I draw them. So you have the editor. That's in a module called editor client. Ooh. Okay. So the editor client is what provides that module. Can I move? No. Oh. That is talking to a bunch of HTTP endpoints which come in here in a module called Editor API. Okay. Yes, that's still coming through. Cool. Then what we have is a module called the runtime. And we have a module over here called the registry. Now it'd be super if I could just move that text without... No, I can't move the text. Okay, I have to bear that in mind. We then have a module called nodes. And we have a big, well, it's not big, it's quite small actually, but I've drawn it big because it's a module called Util. Has it got the S on the end? No, it doesn't have the S on the end. Okay, these are the modules that make up the core of Node-RED. Editor client contains all the browser side content of the editor. Editor API is a Node.js code that provides all the admin routes and provides the authentication and sessions and that type of stuff. Runtime is the heart of Node-RED that has the flow engine and is what actually runs the flows. Registry is the component that loads up nodes from the modules on disk. Nodes is the set of core nodes that Node-RED provides, so the inject, debug, change, function, all of those are in the nodes module. And then util provides common services across them all, like the message catalogs or the translation services, logging, and a whole bunch of useful utilities. And I guess I should probably just draw it here. No, pencil. Get the right colour. And then, where should I draw it? I'll draw it here. Then we have the actual Node-RED module itself. So that's the module you actually npm install, and when you install that, you get these 6 other modules. And Node-RED, what Node-RED does is it calls in to the runtime. It initializes the runtime, initializes the editor API, and it joins the two together. And the way it does that is there is the runtime provides this Runtime API layer here, which is a standard API between the editor and the run. Well, it's the standard API the runtime exposes, and the editor API, when it's initialized, expects just to be given an instance of this API. So it's that API that provides the abstraction between what the editor wants to do and what the runtime can do. And for a colleague's project interested in doing something interesting with the Node-RED editor with a more custom runtime, a different runtime, this architecture is the one we moved to a couple of years ago now, probably 0.18, I think, 0.17. We did this refactoring. And this idea of having this runtime API layer between the runtime and the editor is always, in theory, the point where you could put in a custom layer of code that implements the implements the runtime API, so that the editor can talk to it to get all the information it needs to provide the editor with the flows, the palette, and all that sort of information. But it wouldn't necessarily have to be talking to the runtime. Now, to get it working, I found some less pleasant part. Well, not less pleasant. I found some tweaks we could make to how this API is written without functionally changing the API, to take more advantage of asynchronous functions. So functions in JavaScript declared as async, just to remove a whole bunch of boilerplate code from the code we already had. And that's the bit of work I spent some time doing earlier, and I've broken. So what have I broken? If we go back to my code and make it big so you can see. So here we are, if you look over on the left here, we're in Runtime Lib Api. So this set of files represents the real implementation of the Runtime API that gets given to the editor layer in order to interact with the runtime. And so we're in the nodes module, and get module catalogs. So this is what the editor calls when it wants to load up all the message catalogs, so all the bits of text in whatever language the user is loading their editor in. And we pass in an options object that tells us who's the user accessing the editor for this request, and for this particular request, what language are they wanting to load the catalog in. And this will then return the message catalog for the entire, all message catalogs for nodes in that language. It's part of the initial load of the editor. Now, this is interesting. If I do, and just check, what have I modified? Yeah, let's just revert that. If I do a checkout of master, and then go find, so get mod, so this is what the code looks like currently in the Node-RED you guys have today. Exact same function. It returns a new promise object, and I'm not going to get into the whys and wherefores of promises, but the basic idea is it returns a promise object that at some point in the future will call resolve once it's finished loading up the message catalogs. It will call resolve, which ends up with the result getting passed back up. Now, so if you look at this pattern, it's a function that returns a promise, and we've got this resolve buried in here. And if you look where we are, that is within this callback of the internationalization internal libraries function here. So we call this language, we call this function to change what language the internationalization component is currently using. We change it to the one the user wants to load. We then get all the modules, and then we return. If I switch to the refactored version, just run it up again. Get message catalogs. Here we are. So you'll see we no longer return a promise. And we don't return a promise because it's now been changed to be an asynchronous function. Because every function of this API returns a promise by design. And there was just a huge amount of boilerplate code of creating a new promise object or just returning an instantly resolved promise. And it was just a lot of code that was needless. By making the function async, I could remove a whole load of this boilerplate code. But in this instance, I've broken it. And I've broken it because I missed the fact that change language does not itself return a promise. It has a callback. So what I did, a few dozen times as I was updating all the other places, was you need to make sure we return a promise. And I just stuck the return here, which isn't going to work because this isn't returning a promise. So this is actually one instance when we do need to still be returning a new promise, not primrose, promise, resolve, reject, and we're going to do this work inside the promise. When we're done, we can resolve the result. So, Node-RED's restarted automatically in the background. We now reload, and we're back. So, that's good. So we fixed that bug that I introduced unwittingly earlier. Whilst I'm at it, no, I'm not going to commit that right this second. I'm now going to move on to what I actually wanted to talk about. So I talked a bit about this architectural module layout. And when we came to designing this, it was just trying to work out what are the right chunks to carve into these different components. And trying to minimize two-way dependencies so that you want to try and make sure there's a sort of a clean hierarchy of dependencies. So this is why the Node API is there, so that provides sort of that abstraction that allows those two modules to depend on each other. They kind of depend on this common API to talk to each other. And that makes sense because that's a line which we want to be able to split those two modules apart on. The runtime and the registry is a bit more blurred. The reason is there's a lot of common shared concerns between those two modules. So the runtime is what, as I say, is the actual flow engine. That's what takes your flow JSON and manages creating new node instances and lets them run and does all the message passing, and it's the heart of Node-RED. But when the runtime, when the flow engine says, right, I need a new inject node, because that's what the JSON says, it goes to the registry and says, please give me the constructor for a new inject node, or whatever the node might be. And the registry will return that function back, and the runtime will call it in order to create the node. That's okay, because at that point, that's a sort of a one-way relationship. The runtime goes to the registry to get something, and that something's returned. The problem actually comes with the initial load of the catalog. So when the registry, which is responsible for scanning the file system for modules, for the actual nodes to load, and it does the work to load them. And the reason there's a problem there is when a node is initialized, let's pick an example of the change node for completely arbitrary reasons. For those familiar with writing nodes, the node module a nodes module is expected to export a single function that gets called when it's loaded up with read, which is a handle into the runtime's into the runtime's API. This isn't, and this is again one of the, were we to start from a clean page, this would be cleaner, but this is not the runtime API I've been talking about. This is a sort of subset API of more internal API of the runtime that nodes have access to in order to do the things they need to do. But, and this is the problem, the registry is responsible for loading this module, which means the registry is responsible for giving the node its handle into the runtime. So the registry has to know about the runtime in order to load up the node modules, because it has to pass through the runtime to it. So it's it's not as clean a separation. The registry is not as clean and pure a component as perhaps I would like it to be, because it needs to know about a concrete runtime instance in order to be able to give the API to the nodes it chooses to load. And a result of that is, if we look, so here we are in the source tree, packages, node modules, @node-red, registry, and we go and look at its index.js, its main entry point. It has this init function, which gets passed in a handle to the runtime, which it pulls out the settings object, and then that runtime gets passed down to all the sort of sub-components of the registry. The installer, which deals with installing new nodes or uninstalling them. The loader, which deals with actually loading nodes into the runtime. The registry itself, which is like the internal, database, data store of what's loaded or not. And the library component, which in fact the library doesn't care about the runtime. So one of the things I've been looking at is, is there more we can do to provide a better abstraction? Why does this runtime have to get passed into the registry at all? So to look at that, we can look at, okay, well, here's concretely where the runtime's getting passed in. Let's look at what of this runtime object do we actually reference? What parts of it are we actually using? So, straight away you can see we pull the settings object, the runtime settings. Well, that's fair enough. It could be passed in as a separate object, but we extract it from the runtime object that's passed in. Installer. Let's go and have a look at what installer does with the runtime that gets passed to its init function. Well, you can see here the runtime pulls out runtime events, runtime settings, the log, and the exec module. So events is the internal event engine used for nodes, used by nodes status, runtime events, a whole bunch of stuff. And in this file, because we're in the installer, it has to do things like emit the event that a restart's required if you have upgraded a node, for example. Is there anywhere else we do events? No, in fact, so that's the only place it wants to it wants to emit that event. Okay. What else? Log. Log is the log. There are a few places it wants to log about what's going on. That's a perfectly reasonable thing for it to want to do. Now, if you recall from the diagram I drew, which is that button, we have this common services, this util module down the bottom that provides all this stuff. So actually, there's no real reason for us to be grabbing the log from the runtime object at all. So what we can actually do, because it's being provided by a different module, we can go and get it from the util module directly, like that. And in fact, that's what we do in many other places. And again, this sort of shows how some bits of the internals have evolved and some haven't. You'll find in some places, if you look through the code, we will do this. You'll access the log component. See, now this is where I've got too many screens, so you couldn't see me type any of that, could you? So what I just did, it used to look like that, var log, and then we would extract log from the runtime object. And I've just changed that, oops. So we set the log to be the log object coming out of the common util module. In which case we don't need to pull that out of runtime. And that's good. We've removed one. What's that? Jibbob, you're still seeing the diagram, Jibbob? Or maybe that's... Hopefully you can see my main screen now. I think there's a bit of delay between what you can see and when I see the chat. So yes, I think I've realised I was still showing you the diagram and I've caught myself up. So what else? Great. Yes, you can see my screen. Thanks, Christian. So we've got the events object, settings object, and the exec object. And what's exec used for? Now, exec is what we use when we actually want to run an install or an uninstall, and it wraps up the child process module of Node.js and lets us run a command, get its output. In fact, it's a promise, so you can see it resolve, and if there's any error, we will get the standard error and we can handle it. So why have we wrapped up the standard child process module? Well, let's go and have a look at what exec does. So exec is in Runtime Lib exec. So you can see we import, it is just a wrapper on child process. But the key thing is, what this does is it emits event log events. So if you've used the palette manager in the editor and you click install and it does sort of the spinner whilst it's busy installing, you'll have the button say view log, and click that button and in the editor you see the event log. Well, that works because of this code in the runtime, which runs the child process, and every time we get a complete line of standard out or standard error, we emit an event in the internal event system, an event log event with that text. Well, yeah, if it's output, then we emit an event log with a timestamp, an ID for the run. So if you have multiple invocations, we can distinguish the log lines. And so that's why we wrap up the exec module, just to make that possible to do. So that's why we have exec there. Let's just carry on. Where were we? Yeah, so we were looking at exec. But that's all of those done. So now, we looked at installer. So let's just make some notes here. So the installer is using settings exec and events. Yeah, I'm just going to make a note of events, and it's the restart required event. So let's go look at the loader module. I'll tell you now that's going to want to handle settings, but let's go have a look. So here we pass in the runtime, and you can see we pull out runtime.settings, but we also grab a handle on the whole runtime object, which makes our life a bit trickier because now I've got to search through this whole file to see what do we reference on it in here. So let's go searching. So you can see we do a runtime.log. Okay, so here's an instance where we're accessing the log directly. Again, we're accessing the log via the runtime object. We call runtime.version. So here we are. This is in code actually loading in modules into the runtime. And the module we're trying to load specifies red version, which is it's some rule as to what version of Node-RED does that node support. So obviously to check whether we're in a supported version, it's got to be able to know what version of runtime is being loaded into. So we've got runtime. Let's make a note of these as we go. Settings log version. What else have we got? So that's a log, that's log, settings log. Okay. Right, but we're going to carry on down the rabbit hole. So in turn, calling init of the loader module, it initializes the local file system. Local file system just pulls out runtime.settings. So that's good, we can live with that. Registry Util. So that actually captures the entire runtime object, and it's Registry Util, which is probably the trickiest part of this whole endeavor. So Registry Util is the thing that actually builds up the API object to give to a node module when it's getting loaded. So that red object that gets passed in at the top of a node's file, well, this is where that object is created. So you can actually see here the complete API available to nodes. So you get red.nodes, log, settings, events, hooks, util version, require, comms, a whole load of stuff. And so in turn you can see it ties into the runtime events, hooks, util version, so on and so forth. And then you may wonder, so red.nodes, log and settings are empty functions? Well, yes, they are to begin with. We actually copy in, we don't expose the full internal API, we only expose select functions from those internal APIs to the nodes. But yeah, you can see here, this is why we have to pass in the full runtime object, and I don't yet have an elegant way of removing that hard dependency. Let's keep going. See if we can knock off any other low-hanging fruit. So in fact, just stepping back, in loader, the fact we call runtime.log a lot, well, let's do exactly the same as we did before. Let's load the log from the module, and then instead of calling runtime.log, we just call we reference it on log. Okay. So that's removed one thing. Yeah, just make a note that that goes into util.init, which then depends on everything. And then the core registry itself, in fact, the core registry itself is already a bit different because we don't pass in the runtime. We don't pass in the full runtime. You can see we pass in runtime settings, but we just pass it in directly. We do pass in runtime.events. And let's just make a note of that. What about events? What are the events the registry deals with? So events.emit. So it deals with type registered, so that gets emitted every time a new node is loaded. And restart required. Why is this? Has pending. Oh, had pending and not has pending. Save node. Oh, I can't remember the logic behind that, but yeah, that's an important scenario, no doubt. Is it just those two events? Events emit. Yeah. And yeah, so this is starting to map out the dependency of the registry module back on the runtime. And it's just a case of looking at ways, are there elegant refactoring ways we can break some of these dependencies or rearrange the code internally so that we don't have quite the same dependency pointed in both pointed at each other. So, in fact, I will briefly show you this, and this is what brought all this about. I wanted to create a very simple instance of Node-RED that does not have a real runtime, that serves up the editor and lets the editor load a catalog of nodes, but without the runtime component there at all. And this was a bit more work than I was expecting. I mean, it's not a lot of work. That we remember I talked about how Editor API contains the HTTP endpoints for the editor, util the common services, and the registry that can load up nodes. So effectively, I just load those three modules, I initialize them, and then start them. But to get that working, because the and I should say, you can see up here, here's that same Runtime API, but I've just put in an absolute bare minimum implementation. So even if I go to flows, if I do a get flows, it just returns blank flows. And if I call set flows, it does nothing. It just tells you it's done something, but it does nothing. But the idea here is we can put in some custom code here that can return different flows based on who the user is, maybe, or it's when they hit deploy and set flows gets called, we can do some custom work on the flow and provide feedback to the user without actually running the flow. But to get all of that working, I had to create this fake stubbed out runtime. So you can see I created just a vanilla event emitter. So all those events being emitted by those other objects wouldn't go anywhere. Nodes, because I'm not interested in the runtime portion of all those nodes, I just want their HTML definitions, but the registry can't load just the HTML side, it has to load the node component. This is the minimum viable stubbed out APIs I had to implement in order to get this to work. So in some ways, it would be nicer to be able to point the registry component at a directory and say, just load the nodes into the registry, into the database of what nodes exist, without having to have a full-blown runtime on hand as well. It's not always quite that easy. Just the way Node-RED, some of the nodes work in Node-RED, you have to load their runtime component as well as their editor side. Like, case in point, like the inject and debug nodes, they have the buttons on. Clicking that button calls into their runtime side to do something. So, yeah, it's a little bit messier, but trying to look at how can we make that sort of approach easier. So really, 52 minutes in, what the specific one I wanted to look at was this exec module, and whether there was a case to be made to move this exec module into the util component, because it's a common component used. We call into it both from the registry when we're installing new nodes and the like. We also use it in the core. Where do we use it in the core? We use it in the core when we're doing some of the projects stuff. I forget exactly what actions in the projects work use the exec module. And the other interesting one is the events module. Is there something which is said to move the events module out to util as a common component across them all? So that's some refactoring we want to do. So I'm just trying to think. So there is one thing I'm sort of quite aware with what we've done here is the Node-RED codebase isn't really written to support having more than one instance of Node-RED running in one Node.js runtime. And that's because you don't create a new instance of Node-RED. You just require the modules, you initialize them, and you run. It was never written to be something that supports having more than one instance of Node-RED. Everything is a singleton, effectively. So that's why in this code I'm able to, rather than use runtime.log that gets passed in, the reason I can require the module and just use its log property is because it's a singleton. There is only one of those in existence, and that's the one we can reference. Now that's really useful, but there is also a concern that it does might we want to refactor things in a future where we don't have any singletons like this, and that you're able to create multiple instances of Node-RED within a single node runtime. Now, I'm not saying we want to do that. We know Node-RED, that you wouldn't get any performance benefits being able to do that, because you're just inviting even more work on the single-threaded nature of Node.js. There might be something interesting around worker threads, and that's something I need to spend some more time on. Once we get to Node-RED 2.0 and we can drop Node 8, Node 10, then I suspect there's going to be a bunch of stuff with the worker module we can start making use of in Node-RED. So that will be a space where actually maybe you might want to be able to spin up more than one instance of some of the internal components that are able to act as like a pool of them across worker threads. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But something I'm well aware, I very sort of casually modified this code to no longer use log from the runtime object that got passed in and just require it directly. But of course you can't you can't just do that. And the reason you can't just do that is because we have unit tests. And we have unit tests that will pass in a runtime with a log object and will expect us to be using that log object, not the global log object. So I can tell you now, I bet I've broken some unit tests by making that one casual to change. So let's quickly have a look. And because I've been wittering on for longer than I thought, and all that faffing around getting things working to begin with, who knows where we'll get to, but I think it was, are we in loader? Yeah. So to run the test, that one actually passes. Okay, so that's fine. It means we've not got any tests in there which use the log object to check any of the functional behavior. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Oh, and the installer works as well. In fact, let's just run. Yeah, I was kind of assuming, yeah, needs tests. As I said before in previous weeks, we've got, our test coverage is slipping, and again, this is why I like spending some of this time doing this refactoring. It's not just for the sake of doing it. If anything, it helps just bring about identifying areas of the code that need more coverage and more attention. So, there is a reason to, many reasons why, going back and refactoring code, trying to keep it tidy. It's not just busy work. It's doing it for a purpose. I've lost my list now. Where's my list? Here's my list. Yeah, I mean, to your point about, there is an issue around some of our unit tests absolutely have too much knowledge on the internal implementation. And because they're trying to test individual units, and they know how they expect that unit to call other components that we don't want to test in the one unit, yes, they stub stuff out. And that's what I was kind of expecting to hit with the logs. I was kind of expecting there to be something that verifies that we log a message under certain conditions. Now, by all rights, there ought to be those tests ought to be there. So, one of the things we can now do, now that we fixed a few weeks ago the code coverage reporting, is we can dial in and identify exactly, are there lines that aren't being exercised. But what's harder to do is, okay, it's been exercised, but have we verified that it did the right thing? Did it log the right parameters? Did it, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, so the 2 bits of refactoring I'm going to be looking at tomorrow, because it's 9 o'clock and I don't feel quite brave enough to, maybe events we can do. Let's if you give me 5 or 10 more minutes, see if we can make sense of moving this events component out of the runtime module into the util common module. So to begin with, we can be pretty brute force. The events module is actually pretty sparse. It's pretty sparse because it is a vanilla event emitter, but it does have some usefulness in it. Not a lot, but it has some. For example, we recently deprecated some of the internal events. So we've never really published. They're on a wiki, but we've never formalized as part of our documentation some of the internal events. And we tidied these up a while ago, as in, a few weeks ago, months ago, in one of the 1.2 releases. Just formalized, or made the events a bit more consistent in naming scheme and sort of prefix and event type. So this event emitter has got some custom code that checks to see if anyone ever tries to listen on a deprecated event, and we'll log a warning that they are listening on a deprecated event. Meanwhile, still supporting, still allowing the code to work. So at some point we can remove those deprecated events, but not anytime soon. Not rushing to, but yeah. So what we're going to do is we're just going to drag this events file out of Runtime Lib down into Util Lib. And simple as that. So now we've moved it down to Util Lib. We update Util's index to load it. And we want I think I'm doing this right. I'm going to have to go and tidy this up before I push anything, but and there's nothing to initialize on the event module. Now if we go look at the log, which isn't running, of course, because I killed it. We'll wait for that in a sec. Okay, so now we've done that. Now, obviously, this events module has now disappeared from the runtime. So what we're going to quickly search for is any require statement for something to do with events. So here you can see like 8. Well, no. 6, 5, because that last one doesn't count. Get rid of that log. There we are. So here we have source that's trying to load the events module from. So we're inside the runtime module, runtime lib flows flow.js. So instead we're gonna rather than use event, our local events will load it from util, and I bet that's something we're going to copy and paste in a few places.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Well, thank you, Alexa, for... No, I shouldn't have said her name, should I?
Fur is a thick growth of hair that covers the skin.
Alexa, cancel. Yeah, these all should be consts, really. So the idea here is just trying to pull out things that really should be more common services, so common bits, if you like, that shouldn't be owned by one component. They want to be referenced by multiple places, so we pull them out and and then we see what's what. So now we've done all that. That's all the references for the events module. Node-RED should now run, which it is, which is good. And then if you recall back in the registry, if we search registry for events, so now wherever we have runtime.events, what we can be doing is we can reference the common events module. This is hacky code, which lets the unit tests run. Basically, when it initializes, it removes any existing listener for that event and re-adds it, which is kind of lazy code to stop you adding listeners multiple times in the unit test. It removes it if it already exists. Yeah, ripe for tidying that up, but not right now. In fact, here we've already got I think we can do this. Yep. We don't need events to be pulled out for the runtime, which means we no longer need the runtime to initialize the exec module, which is good. That's one less thing. We can remove. There we go. So yeah, so now it's just a case of slowly working through, finding all these references, tidying them up to use the events package, which the events module we've just moved. Then there's a case of going through and fixing the unit tests to do the same. That looks good to me. Did I really fix all these already? Yeah, I did. Yep. Tell this is my concentrating face. Here we've got things pulling out runtime events. So let's fix that. And here we want and again at some point I need to go through and just tidy up, make all these vars, consts, just to be neatening up. But again, it's that sort of busy work of don't want to do it needlessly, but almost there. Okay, and Node-RED still loads, which is normally a good sign. Have we got everything we need? Let's just check one more thing. So in the main runtime, which somewhere in here we create our internal API. Yeah. For reason, I've lost it now. Sorry, I'm just scrolling around mindlessly. You can see here we do this funky accessor functions for those things. I think that's. Oh, I'm not going to get into it, but I think we need that for events because we've moved it out. So let's just see if I back in Node-RED, if I just trigger a random inject button. Messages arriving, this is all coming through as events. That's goodness. Hit deploy, that deployed, no errors. That under the covers has tested a whole bunch of the code we've just modified just to get that working. So that's good. From a test point of view, we need to move the unit tests. So the way the tests are structured, and I've covered this in previous videos, under the test subdirectory you've got unit tests, and then we've got a directory structure that mirrors the source code exactly. So every JavaScript file has a corresponding test file, and in fact we've also got a test file that makes sure that's true. It walks the source tree and makes sure there is a corresponding non-empty test file for it. So the fact I've just moved, we can see this in action. If I do mocker test unit spec, that fails because util lib events does not exist, because it's found that source file, but we've not got the corresponding spec file. It doesn't do the reverse. It doesn't tell you off if you have a spec file that doesn't match its source code, but to be honest, that's a much rarer issue. So I've moved the event spec, the test script, down into this module. Then we just need to modify, let me just check how we do this. So we're in @node-red util events. We just need to modify the import. Yeah, in fact, now I look at what tests we have, it needs more tests. But because it's such a vanilla object, it's a vanilla flip event emitter, then yeah, there are no tests for it. We then added the deprecated notice, and yeah, prime example of, well, we should have added a test for that, but we didn't. Let me focus on this for a moment. So test unit node-red util lib. Yeah, so they all pass. And that, you may say, well, of course they passed. There are no tests. But you can see it has actually managed to load the module, so it's pointed at the right thing, which is goodness. Yeah, that's just embarrassing, lack of that. What could well now break is, for exact same reason about changing the importing of log, now we've changed how the events object, now we've changed how the event object is accessed in the code. There could well be unit tests that try to hook into that to verify events. So I, again, fully expect us to get some test failures when I run the core unit tests. And then my chore tomorrow morning will be step through them. Oh, there we go. So, in fact, it's already blown up. And hopefully it's not. So it's failed because it cannot find the module blah 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 runtime lib events. That's not so helpful because it hasn't told us where was that. Where did that come from? So let's just go have a quick search in. No. What am I doing wrong? Why is that? Maybe, is it in? So, okay, we're not finding it. I was expecting to find somewhere a require statement for that path, but yeah, it's not turning up. So it's there to be found. I'm not going to make you guys watch me try and search for files. Maybe I might a little. Okay. So we've got 87 results for events. Yeah, I'm just going to have to work my way through and try and find. Here it is. No, that's not it. There it is. There it is. So, where are we? So we're in the flows test spec. So here you can see it's trying to require this source code, this events module directly. It shouldn't be doing that. That moved. So if I change that to Node-RED Util lib events and try test core again. I'll see how that runs, but I think at this point I'm going to wrap it up. I hope that's interesting. Like I said, this is trying to get some refactoring into place, trying to improve some of the internal packaging, how things are separated, to try and make some of the more interesting use cases of Node-RED more feasible. The tests are now running, so we've fixed the import. Now to see if the tests pass or not. To try and make it easier to build some of the interesting scenarios, like this one around having a standalone editor with a different back end. Okay, so we've got some fails. I was kind of expecting some fails. We're up to 14 fails, all in the comms, and that's probably comms relies heavily on events, so I'm not surprised. That's going to be some dependency on the events module. I'm not going to fix that instantly, so I'm going to take my screen away to take the temptation of just trying to fix one more thing in front of you away. Like I say, it's you've got to be careful with refactoring. I've refactored the internals of Node-RED quite a few times over the years. Each time, making incremental improvements for sure, doing it for good reason. But you've got to be a bit careful that you are doing it for good reason. There's plenty of bits of code. I spoke earlier about this when.js module that I spent this morning removing. We could have removed it 2-3 years ago, but there was never a strong, compelling reason to do so. But I've got half an eye on the 2.0 release in April, so I'm trying to make sure we clear out some of this old technical debt, if you like, now, so that 2.0 is slightly less encumbered by it, is part of the theory. There we go. So, I suspect because we're in the early stages of 1.3 release, 1.3 will go out late January. We've got quite a lot of development work. I mean, the Subflow module stuff I was doing last week is a big chunk of what I've been focused on. But, there's quite a lot of pull requests to review and some good discussions going on with some of the community contributors in the community about stuff they're interested in working on. So there's loads to do. So if you're watching this interested in getting started with contributing to Node-RED, I don't think last week and I don't think this week were necessarily good introductions for how to get started. I'm a bit deep in the weeds at the moment, but there are earlier videos in the archive on YouTube that I do a bit more of an end-to-end of a bug fix or a new feature, and look at how to go from debugging an issue, finding the fix, doing the pull request, all the way through. So they're interesting ones to go back into the archive and see if you can dig them out. Otherwise, do just leave a comment, come chat to us in Slack. Always happy to chat. If you're interested in getting started with contributing to Node-RED, but you're just not sure how best to go about it, come and have a chat, because there's plenty of different ways to get started. It kind of depends where you're coming from. What's your experience? How much do you know in terms of JavaScript, in terms of testing and all this sort of stuff? But if you're relatively new to it all, it may seem a bit daunting, but there's easier ways in, rather than jumping in at the deep end with some of the stuff I've been doing in the last couple of weeks. So thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. Do subscribe if you're on YouTube. Do follow if you're on Twitch. Like I say, every Monday, 8 p.m. Come say hi if you're watching live. Otherwise, have a good week. And cup of tea time. I think that's what we say. I did actually make a cup of tea before I started, but because I've been talking solidly, I've had about 2 sips and it's pretty cold now. So time for a fresh cup of tea. And with that, I bid you all good night. Bye now.